As you've all probably heard, there's going to be a remake of the 1977 miniseries of Roots. As you probably all saw, there's a new trailer out for the 2016 remake of the movie. And I just wanted to come in today to discuss my feelings on why I believe that the remake of this movie is important. I know that a lot of people are saying, oh my God, not another slave movie. I just want to go back to what Roots did for me when it first came out. I am 51 years old, so when the original movie aired, I was 12 years old. It aired in 1977. And I remember when we were in school, I think I was about in the seventh grade, um, in our social studies class, we were, we discussed it in school, and we were not told to watch it, but it was suggested that we watched it. Now, when Roots came out during that time, I was born in 1965, and Roots came out in 1977. Now, when Roots came out, this is what was going on in my life. Um, I lived in a city that desegregation of the schools was just about to start happening. I lived on one side of the town, and I would be bused to the other side of town eventually to go to school. So they were voting for this. It was the voting prior to this actually happening. So I remember when Roots came out, as I said, it was suggested to us in our social studies class that we go home and watch the movie. Now, I knew that in my house we were going to watch it. My mother had been watching the reviews of the upcoming movie, and she planned to have the whole family sit down together as a family to watch it. Now, what my mother did is she explained a little bit about, our history as Black people in America and how we came here. Um, because in the history books, when I was younger, there was maybe 3 pages devoted to slavery, and you knew the word slavery, but you didn't really know what it meant. You heard stories from older people in your family. Like I had, my grandfather was very, very militant. He served in the service. He was one of the first Black paratroopers. And I remember my grandfather always used to say, never be ashamed of how we came here, that we came from a very good people, a very strong people, and that we were descendants of kings and queens. Now, when my grandfather used to tell me that, I heard it, but then again, I really didn't understand it. I had heard it all growing up. He made no bones about it that he thought he was a king, just not in his land. So the first night that Roots aired, I remember, my family sitting down. We were all in the living room. I remember my mother was on the couch watching, and us kids were down on the floor. That first night, the thing that stands out in my mind most was when they captured Kunta. Um, and since I'm older now, I believe that the reason why they slowed that part of the movie down because the capture of Kunta is in slow motion is because everything that led up to his capture showed you how proud he was to be a Mandingo warrior. To have just gone through warrior training, passing it, it was a rite of passage. And then how the slowing down of his capture shows exactly how traumatic that was to him. and they wanted you to feel every second of his freedom being taken from him. So they slowed it down. I remember my brothers were, if I was 12, my next brother was 11, and my youngest brother was 9. My youngest brother probably didn't get it, and my brother that was next to me in age got it a little bit. After each night, the next day when we got home from school, because when it went off, it was too late for my mother to discuss it, because back then kids didn't stay up till 11 and 12 o'clock at night. We went to bed at 9 o'clock, but we were allowed to stay up later to watch this movie. So when we got home from school the next day, while my mother was cooking dinner, she would ask us if we had any questions. And, she would explain, answer any questions and explain what we had viewed the night before, because up until then, you never really had a true picture, a face of slavery, a smell of slavery, the pain of slavery. We heard about it, but we never saw it. So when you went to school the next day, everybody was talking about it. The first scenes of the movie, when Kunta was there with his family, and it showed that, there were kings and queens and elders, and they had a rich history. It reconfirmed what my grandfather taught me about who we were. Now, that brings me to Kunta being, the middle passage to America, and how he suffered through that, and just the pain of being torn from everything that he knew. And at the time that Kunta was taken, I think Kunta was 13 or 14. So imagine that. Then he gets to America and everything that happened to him. The movie back then was really, really traumatic to me, but thank God that I had a parent that knew that this would be a lot and sat down excuse me, and explained everything to me. My mother grew up in the 60s, and we all know the 60s, we were fighting for rights here in America. My mother wasn't militant, and she wasn't, out burning down, neighborhoods. We grew up in Cleveland. So in Cleveland, we had the Huff riots, and they were televised across the country. National Guards in the streets. So my mother grew up in a time when we were fighting for our rights. We grew up in a time where some of the rights that my mother's generation fought for, we were starting to realize. This new movie that's going to air, and I'm looking down because I have notes, May 30th, is being produced. One of the producers on the movie is LeVar Burton. He had played the original Kunta Kinte. And one of the directors is Mario Van Peebles. LeVar Burton is a very good actor, because when he played the part of Kunta, he had never acted before. He was a college student. They came in to read for the movie and got the part on spot. He did a couple readings. He was their Kunta. Mario Van Peebles is a good director. He's directed several movies. This new movie is going to air across 3 channels. It's going to air on A&E, Lifetime, and the History Channel. Now, a lot of people say that they don't believe that we need another slave movie. I believe that we do. This generation that we have now They have reaped the benefits of all that the civil rights movement fought for, Jim Crow that our grandparents went through, but they don't want to hear about it anymore. They just know that they have their rights. They don't know what our parents and our grandparents and their grandparents and so on and so on and so on. They say they want more positive images on us, of us out there. What I say to that is the Jews and the Holocaust, the one thing that the Jews say is we will never forget, because if we forget, something like this could happen again. They relive it, they tell it, they pass it on to their children so that it will never happen again. Slavery is not a shame for black people. We are descendants from kings and queens. We should be so proud of what we came from. Instead of being ashamed of who we are, ashamed of how we came to be in this country, you need to look at it another way. And this is the way my grandfather told me to look at it. I am proud to be descendant of a people that were brought here in the belly of a ship, shackled together, with no rights, didn't know the language, didn't even know that this place called America existed. We suffered, but through that suffering, we grew strong. We rose up. We fought back. We never gave up. And we were willing to die for what we believed was our God-given right to be free. I am the type of mom that message of being proud of who you are and what you came from, I instilled in my children. To this day, I tell them that. I do not want them to forget about it. I do not want them to turn their head from it because it's too painful to remember, or it's a shame. It is not our shame. It's the shame of the folks who brought us here. My grandfather, as I mentioned earlier in this video, was one of the first black paratroopers. The Triple Nickels, if you ever look them up, my grandfather was part of that. So for this movie that's going to come on May 30th, the reason why I think it's important is now we're in a turbulent time in our country again, where black boys are being killed in the streets, where women that are arrested for traffic stops die mysteriously in cells and jails. We're just a black man walking down the street is public enemy number one. I tell my son in my home, his name is Aaron. When he goes out into the world, he is young black male, public enemy number one. We need to never forget our history. We have a group of young folks now that call themselves Black Lives Matter. Well, they are a part of the Black Lives Matters movement. They need to see this. They need to know that the fight continues. That you are descendants from kings and queens. And that your place here on earth is just as sacred as any other races here on earth. We have a strength that is born in us. I have friends that they don't want no parts of Africa. They don't want to even admit that their ancestors came from there. I don't know who raised them. I don't know what they were told or weren't told. But I don't want a history that only starts here as a slave. I want to know further back. Where did my people come from? Who were they? Who were they? And even if you don't agree, you watching this video, please allow your child to watch it. Because when I was 12 and 13 and whenever Roots first came out, after watching it, I wanted to know more about us as a people and why the true story wasn't written up in our history books. So what it made me do is I started reading. I went to the library and I found other books, other stories, other, history, the Underground Railroad. I immerse myself in other things. When I went, that explain my history here in this country. There is so much that this generation just doesn't know. We have a book called The Greatest Black Inventors. If you ever get that book and just take your time. My son had a book report when he was about 14, 15. And we had to get that book and because he had to do a report, and I thought that would be a good book to do a report. We could do it on someone other than the Harriet Tubman, the ones that we all did book reports on. As I sat there and helped my son, do the outline for his book report, and we were just browsing the book and trying to figure out who we were going to do the story on, I forgot all about his paper that was due because I was so amazed at all the inventions that we did. And the reason why is because we were the workers, so we found different ways to do things, better ways, unique ways to do things to help get the work done that we were tasked to do as slaves or in Jim Crow era. So all of these inventions that have our name on it that basically we may not have gotten credit for. So in closing, what I say is this movie Roots is important. It's important. It may not be important to you as an adult, but our kids need to know where we came from. Just last year, do you realize that there was a book, that a geography book that a mother, when her child brought it home from school and she was looking over the section in the book about slavery, it said that the slaves were workers who had immigrated here, and they may not have liked to be slaves, but they enjoyed the work that they did, making their masters happy. Really? Really? We liked our babies being sold away from us. We liked our women being beat. We liked being worked to death from sunup to sundown. We enjoyed that. To them, we weren't human. I remember years back, I went to the U.S. Virgin Islands, and there was a tour guide, a black tour guide. And I remember we were late for the tour bus that we intended to take, me and my ex and I. So we were going to wait till the next bus came. But this older black guy came and he said, "Did you want to do, I can take you?" And then we were like, no, because he had no one else on his it was a little pickup truck with some boards on it. It wasn't actually a bus. It was like a gypsy tour. So we were like, no, trying to stay safe. We'll wait for the next one. And I remember he looked at us and he said, "Would you like to do Mr. Charlie's tour or the real tour of what, have a real tour from a native?" And so, he wasn't charging that much. So we went on his tour. And one of the places he took us to is a sugar plantation. And, He told us a story about how pirates would come there and bring slaves, and they were making rum. And if any of you know, if you go to the Caribbean islands, they give away rum like nobody's business. We came back with about 5 or 6 free bottles. He told us how Christopher Columbus did not discover America. He discovered the islands. When I stood on that plantation, he took us to the remnants of I guess like an oven where the sugar would come, the sugar cane would come through, and I guess it would be reduced to its liquid form. And he explained how the slave would have to stand there and keep that fire stoked all day to keep this process going, to barrel up all that, so when the pirates came through, they could get their rum and go be on their way. When I was standing there that day, it was about 110 degrees. Hot. Can you imagine standing there being beat and made to keep this fire stoked, and it's like 100 degrees outside, sun beating down on your head, no hour lunch break, no 2 15-minute breaks, no you can run to the bathroom when you want to, no can I get a cold glass of water, nothing. You're a slave. When I was standing there, it's like something rose up from my toes all the way up, and I felt like shivers in my blood. And I don't know if my ancestors were saying to me, yes, we know you feel it. You're here as a tourist enjoying a vacation, but this is where we toiled and died. We don't need to let our children forget this. We don't. We don't. Even if it's painful for us to remember, it is something that we cannot forget. We have to teach them, if nothing else, the strength and that we have within us to overcome insurmountable odds. Isn't that the most important reason why they should see the movie? That's what my parents taught me. It wasn't that we were slaves. That wasn't the message that I got from Roots. The message that I got from it is Kunta Kinte came here, was brought here. He never forgot who he was, and he never gave up the dream to be free. And he instilled that dream in his child, and she instilled it in her child, and he instilled it in his children, and it went on and on. All of us have that story in our family. All of us have that slave, that, and I'm not going to call the ancestor that made the Middle Passage a slave. All of us have that African that was brought over here. All of us. I don't care what complexion you are. The lighter you are, it just means the more that, and I mean skin color. The lighter you are, it just means that your ancestors were raped more. I'd rather be this chocolate, beautiful complexion that I am. Maybe it meant that my ancestor was not desirable. Maybe our noses were too big. Maybe my skin was too dark, or their skin was too dark. But if that spared me from having to lay under the master, or spared my ancestor from having to lay under the master, hallelujah. I love this chocolate skin that I'm dipped in. So when May 30th comes, I will be watching Roots 2016. I want to see, do they stay true to the story? Is this a side story? Is this other parts of the book that Alex Haley wrote, and maybe they're including more of the story into the new movie? So what I ask is if you don't watch the movie for yourself, please let your children watch. Please let them have a bird's eye view. Let them make their own decision. Let them be able to see that this, and I'm going to curse in this, I was going to try not to, this shit that they're writing in these history books now is what my grandfather calls his story, not ours. History is his story. This new 2016 movie is being directed and produced by Black people. Let's support them. And with that, you two, I'm going to come back once the movie airs. Maybe I think it's going to be on for 4 nights. So what I'll do is I'll watch the first 2 nights, and then I'll come back and do a review on what I think, because I was there, old enough when the original came out, and I just want to see, what the characters are. They have pretty good actors playing the main characters that we remember. Kizzy, Anika, Noni, Rose. Kunta is a newcomer, just like the original Kunta was. Laurence Fishburne is playing Alex Haley. Fiddler and Chicken George. They're also major Hollywood actors. Let's support our people. Let's support our ancestors. Let's show them that we care, we appreciate what they lived and died for us to have a better life. For us. Think of all the things that we have. And think about this. Think about the generation of the 60s and the 50s and the 40s. Our parents' generation, our grandparents' generation. They were so determined that their children and grandchildren will have rights that they could only imagine, could only dream of, that they were willing to die for it. Ask yourself today, what is going on in the world with Blacks that you are willing to die for? What would you give your life for today? That's how much our ancestors loved us. Do your part, okay? All right. Thanks for clicking on the video. And if you liked it, please like, comment, and subscribe. I really would like some comments to see if anyone else is going to watch the movie, because I will be front and center on April 30th. Oh, I'm sorry, May 30th. Have a good day. See you then.